we're going to have a couple of discussions then today about how governance can support us, and particularly how governance works with security, which is where kind of the domain where we hear most about governance coming in. And so I wanted to introduce for our next section, Alexandre and John from, Alexandre is one of our professionals as well. And John, as we heard at the beginning, has just become our probably latest FinOps certified practitioner. So congratulations on that. And they're going to be talking about how SecOps and FinOps can work together to create a better cloud governance program. So Alexandre and John, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Alexandre PARÈS. So I'm with my ex-colleague Jean. And together we will present you one of our previous experience to highlight how SecOps and FinOps work together for better cloud governance. So
hi everyone, I'm Jean Verron, a cloud security engineer.
So for this talk, we are both working for Sunbird. So it's a multinational enterprise that is migrating application to the cloud using infrastructure as code. Sunbird has many products. So they have a SunCube, a business-to-business application. They have another application, BlueSun, that is currently running in the development account. And we have with us Bob, that is the project owner and is ready to request a production environment for this application. So we will see how a product are released in the next slide at Sunbird. So at Sunbird, when a product owner is ready to release his application, he can request a production account. When this request is received by the central IT team, the project is then onboarded. Then guardrails are defined. And finally, the production account is delivered. During all these steps, monitoring is performed to provide both FinOps and SecOps alertings. Next slide, please.
We will see in the next few slides how Bob is onboarding as a project owner at Sunbird to be aligned with both SecOps and FinOps best practice and requirement. Then I will explain how we enforce at Sunbird control using policy such as Cloud and IaC Policy. And finally, we will see how monitoring is set up to detect misconfiguration to provide alert to Bob in his cloud journey.
So as a project owner, Bob will be onboarded with both FinOps and SecOps team. Before their production account is provided, the project will have to go through approvals. Having this review guarantee homogeneous governance across the entire application landscape at Sunbird. Next slide, please.
So onboarding at Sunbird is divided in three main parts. So first you will have the security review and the FinOps review that will be explained by Alexandre, and architecture review. These three parts can be done at the same time. And for the security review, so if we deep dive a little bit, so we have first of all the security service review. We will go service by service to see if the configuration of the service is compliant regarding our internal security policy. After, we will go a little bit higher with the security architect review. So we will see if the architecture of the application is well defined and be compliant with our internal policy also and the regulation. After, we will onboard the poll on our security tool, and we will adapt the security level to the project depending on the regulation and the data that the project have.
Just go back for the, yes. So in the FinOps review, we want Bob to understand why FinOps is important and how it's applied at Sunbird. Then we will revise budgets provided by Bob with actuals and forecast from his development account and also additional insight he may have for the production account. After that, we will go through asset review to check recommendation. Then we will review also accounts metadata and check all of that for the cost allocation capabilities. Finally, we will check with Bob if his project needs quotas and limits update. And as you can see, there are many personas involved in these reviews. So a clear onboarding process will quickly provide compliant accounts without blocking the business to provide these accounts. Next slide, please.
So after see how a project is onboarded at Sunbird, we will see how Guardrails is put at Sunbird. So first of all, you need to think as Bob. Bob is a project owner, can have a scope change and may not want to respect our guidelines. So we need to have a way to make sure that Bob will respect our security and FinOps guideline. To do so, we will enforce some policies such as Cloud and IaC Policy. Can you switch to the next slide? So, and how this policy works. So you have mainly two types of policy, as I said previously, IaC policy and cloud policy. For the IaC policy, this policy will be applied on your CI/CD pipeline, and they will block the user to push from your CD pipeline to the cloud environment. For example, for IaC policy, you have Sentinel or OPA. And for the cloud policy, so it's a stronger policy than the IaC. For the cloud policy, it's mainly such as SCP on AWS or policy on GCP or other policy like that in other cloud provider. It will be applied on your cloud provider and it will block the user at the API level. So it's a stronger way to enforce some best practice. Can you switch?
So why does it matter? First, FinOps policy can help us limit the blast radius by enforcing quotas on limits. So an example could be the amount of requests a user can have on a specific database services. Secondly, policy can help us promote best practices, for example, to use latest generation instances. And finally, they will help us enable other FinOps capabilities, such as the cost allocation one, by enforcing specific tags on accounts.
For the security purpose, so policy will do the same job. First, SecOps policy can help us to limit blast radius by enforcing configuration of service and prevent misconfiguration. For example, you can block user to deploy and create API key. You can block user to have a non-compliant EMS DV2 instances in AWS. And secondly, policy will help us to promote security best practice, such as blocking some specific permission to enforce one step further the least privilege, for example. And finally, the policy will enable us to ensure a uniform level of security through the company by, for example, applying your internal encryption policy in all applications. Next slide. So, what is inside the IaC policy? Now, let's see what is inside and how it works. So, as said before, we will first deep dive on the IaC policy, and after I will go to the cloud policy. There are two main types of IaC policy. You have Sentinel and OPA. Each rule will have a name, a description, a query only for OPA, and an enforcement level to either block or warn the user. And finally, the code that you can see an example of a code Sentinel at the right. The Sentinel guarantees that the EC2 instances have the right tag for the scheduler instance. So you can see that at the right, there are a part of the code that allow to retrieve all the EC2 instance, and another part of the code that filter the EC2 instance that don't have the tag or not the right value of the tag. This Sentinel rules is only applied on Terraform code, and it's configured when you perform a plan. But you need to be careful because for Sentinel, it can only be applied in the case of Terraform Enterprise or Cloud. If you're using Terraform open source, you need to go through OPE because Terraform Sentinel is not available on Terraform open source. Now that we are seeing how IaC work and what is inside, we will see what is a cloud policy. Can you switch? So CSP policy or cloud policy, it's, for example, on AWS, it's called SCP policy. On GCP, it's called organization policy. That will allow us to filter and block API call made by certain user or service accounts, such as, for example, as I said, SCP. At the right, you can see that this it's an SCP, and this SCP will ensure that no user can deploy, for example, a G2 instance, but you can change the type of instances, even if there are admin. So we can block with this admin action. These rules are normally used by security practice to block certain API code, but can be applied in the case of FinOps, as the final risk is also a security risk. Now that we have seen all the enforcement rules, we will see how to set up alerting and monitoring.
Next slide, please. So project is now onboarded and running in the cloud with best practices from both FinOps and SecOps practices. To improve our visibility, we have deployed monitoring tools from both practices. So let's see in the next slide what we are talking about. So in our business case, Sunbird has started the implementation of FinOps after adopting SecOps practice. With that context, we want to leverage existing tools for our FinOps practice, and existing SecOps tools can provide a wide range of features that is described in the left side of this slide. Many features can be useful for the FinOps practice, such as service configuration, global overview, and even rule-based alerts. But FinOps can provide monitoring and alerts also based on budget management, dedicated FinOps dashboards, and service recommendation. For these features, we can't rely on SecOps tools, and we need dedicated FinOps tools. These tools can be either native, third-party, or internal. And it's still relevant to benchmark both SecOps and FinOps tools for features that can be provided by both tools. Some of these tools provide a full range of monitoring for both FinOps and SecOps practice. Next slide, please.
Now, Bob has been trained on the tool and knows the best practice on both FinOps and SecOps. He's aware of Guardrails and monitoring in place at Sunbird. Bob is now an autonomous tenant owner.
Next slide, please. So as main takeaways for our business case, we have the first and most important one: teams need to collaborate. As you have seen, there are many personas involved in the Bob journey. Secondly, we have the leverage SecOps and FinOps on SecOps tools and processes. FinOps adoption can be eased using SecOps tools and processes, increasing agility on both disciplines. Then we have continuously review and update your tools. This is a good one because FinOps adoption can improve over time, and this is the same case on the SecOps part, as well as tools evolve also over time. Then use existing unified tools. As both SecOps and FinOps tools can be used for both practice, you have an example with CSPM tools that can tackle this. Enforce policy, increase your coverage by enforcing policy on both, on one side, the CI/CD pipeline, and on the other side, the cloud environment that can be done, as Jean described, using both cloud and IaC policies. Then you have automate policy, use policy as code to trace, document, and revert change if you need it. And finally, set up a strong exception processes. This is really an important one, as the more rule you have deployed, the more exception you have to handle. Next slide, please. So based on our Sunbird use case, we may want to add some new feature to our backlog, such as implementing cost estimation on security scanner in the CI/CD pipeline to provide engineers with better insight. Then we could publish a cloud policy FinOps framework that will expose policy with documentation, enforcement timelines to end users. And finally, integrate project onboarding with self-service cloud portal. This is a great way to provide product owner with the right tools. And for example, they can leverage self-assessment for FinOps and SecOps practices. So that's close our use case. So next slide, please. So a big thank you. I hope you have found our use case helpful, and we remain available at the end of this summit for your questions.
JR here from the FinOps Foundation. Thank you for watching. Please go to FinOps.org if you want to get plugged into this amazing community. And of course, hit subscribe right here on YouTube to get all the future content. Hope to see you soon.